Hey Benny, thanks for the response on material spirituality. Yeah, it's an interesting subject. I mean, one of the first things that strikes me about your response is your comment about materialism and spirituality being diametrically opposed to one another. And, there's definitely a truth to that because, words mean what people think they mean when they use them. I mean, because they're the inventors of the words. And they do tend to think that spirituality is a metaphysical thing. Now, to me, nothing can be diametrically opposed to materialism. I believe we're all made of material. There's no escaping that. There's no dualism available. There's nothing that's not material. Empty space is still space. It has physical properties. It generates sense inputs. We can see light passing through space. So everything, if the vacuum is your, paradox that might seem, not you in particular, but you in general, might seem like, well, it's not substance. No, it's all material. And, I'm a perspectivist. I believe we also only have perspectives. But I define material in terms of the perspectives we have on it. And basically, I believe it's axiomatic that we as individuals exist as perceivers, and that material is whatever makes these sense perceptions, which is a subset of our perceptions, so consistent. Now, if there is nothing making them consistent, then my theory is wrong, but the consistency also defines itself just in our experiences. So nothing can be opposed to materialism. So anytime I see a phenomena, I look for a material source for that phenomena, including crazy hallucinations. Somebody's having crazy hallucinations, you find out if they're on some sort of a drug or have a mental problem, or there's material reason even for these so-called immaterial, conditions or immaterial phenomena. Now, I noticed that all of our emotions and feelings have at some point had metaphysical explanations. And that's because we seem to have sensed our dream body, our dream self, and we had thought that our feelings are not chained to material reality in the way our body is, say. So, we came up with this idea of the metaphysical to explain these experiences of ourselves, of our dream selves, which seem immaterial. Well, subsequent to that, we had come up with a material model of the brain, and we have invented computers. And so now we know it is possible for a material object, like a computer, to have a logical structure such that it can simulate phenomena or produce phenomena that don't seem physical, and that they're not limited to these same laws of physics that, again, our body is limited to. So, we have thought that lust at some point was metaphysical, okay? That it's magical, and that the love is magical at the very least. Or in Christianity, that it's the work of the devil trying to tempt you. That's part of a metaphysical play between God and the devil that plays out within us. But we're wrong. Lust is just the DNA making sure we procreate. Doesn't care if it's overblown in some cases. Doesn't have to work perfectly. If it works in 70% of the cases, that'd be good enough. And so we have a material explanation for something like lust, for hunger, for all of our thoughts now. Even for mathematical thoughts and logical structures. There's material basis. And for those things that we don't see a material basis, we still expect there to be one. If we don't understand why the brain is logical, whether it's because nature is logical or something about our own perceptions, whatever the explanation turns out to be, we have reason to suspect it'll be material. So in the question of spirituality, of course it's going to be material. Maybe it's material of this sort of the brain's having hallucinations that are meaningless and we really just should overcome. See, I don't believe that. I lead a spiritual life. I'm an atheist, but I've always had a very spiritual attitude about my decisions. You know, what is going to help me grow and help everybody else grow? What is the most enlightened thing? How can we all benefit? How can we make sure that we learn from an experience that maybe is going to go bad? How can I avoid that situation? How can I maybe take some small burden now that will save us all a large burden, or maybe just save other people a large burden in the future, you know? And if I'm strong enough to do that, I have reason to do that. I try to take a spiritual path. I try to figure out what the right thing is to do. I embrace my spiritual experiences. I try to provoke spiritual experiences. I go repeatedly back to the places that seem to have generated spiritual experiences. So for example, in my case, you know, a walk in nature, or just spending time in nature. I have feelings in my life during these experiences of a connection with the universe and nature. These things make me stronger later on when I'm trying to do the right thing. These things help me feel connected, so that if I do something that benefits someone else or the environment, that I feel that as a personal benefit through my enlightened self-identification with the whole. And so I want to do that with spirituality. And I think we have a simple, beautifully simple connection here. If I'm right about enlightenment, that it's related, perhaps more complex in my simple statement of it, but still related to the idea of expanding our perspectives, our frames of reference. And we have spiritual experiences in which people repeatedly talk and feel about their connection to everything and how right everything was fitting together and how they saw their role in the universe without losing their individuality. You know, they see how they're just a part or a speck in the universe, and yet rather than feel insignificant and pointless, it makes them feel connected, and there's a sort of beauty they can get out of it, and they can adopt these wider perspectives, and they can sympathize with the planet, they can sympathize with other cultures and feel a part of those other cultures because they're human, or whatever the spiritual experience is, tending to give them something that they feel is like an expanded, you know, an expanded view. Now, it doesn't always have to be true, right? Just like you can have lust and it can be sort of untrue. You know, you can be desperate and be lustful for somebody that you're not really attracted to. That doesn't discredit the concept of lust. That doesn't mean that lust is not going to work to motivate procreation. It doesn't mean you don't really have a biochemical system for falling in love and procreating, and it includes lust. It just means that, you know, it's this genetic technique, you know. If you get a close enough shot, if you can shoot that gun of, you know, lust, they don't all have to find somebody to procreate with. Well, it's the same thing with spirituality. You know, we have this urge to be spiritual. A lot of people follow it to just a bullshit path. A lot of people follow it just enough so that they can pat themselves on the back. Whatever. It doesn't mean there's no spirituality. There's still this urge of spirituality pushing us to expand our consciousness, expand our frame of reference, to see a bigger picture. And what would be the material reason for that? Well, again, using the lust example, it's so that we can procreate and our genes can survive. Well, why would we need a bigger perspective? I don't know, so that our families can survive, so that our culture can survive, so that the biosphere, which is all part of the same genetic material, can survive. Maybe all of the genetic material in the world has some element of this because there's symbiosis. Maybe this is why symbiosis can happen. Maybe this is why things do fit together. Maybe, you know, some of it is just everything trying to survive and finding the solutions, but some of it is opening your mind to see where something is beneficial to you, to see that something you consume is something you're going to nurture, so that you can take that plant, instead of kill it by eating it, you can plant 100 and just eat 50 or 99, or eat all 100 but collect the seeds so that it can survive, and then it survives and you survive, and it's a mutual, mutually beneficial relationship.